just found my mom. She's on the ground looking for her. She's dead, and I don't know. Are you in Madison County or Fremont County? I'm Chad, the husband.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Who killed Tammy Daybell? Where was she killed? How was she killed? Even the deputy medical examiner, Dr. Lily Marston, testified that she could not really be certain of the cause or the manner of death. But Jason McKay Ablegan, a co-worker of Garth Daybell, Chad's son, was an excellent rebuttal witness for the prosecution. One of the things Jason testified to was this.
I remember he said that he found her when he got home from work, and he didn't know where his father was.
In this analysis, we're going to speculate in an area you may not have seen before. What if the circumstances of Tammy's death are totally different to what we've thought so far? That she wasn't murdered in bed, or for that matter, the bedroom, or even inside the house. Also, what if she was murdered much earlier while Garth was still out working, but prior to his return late that night? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'll be doing a live of the closing arguments on May the 29th. So, that's starting at 8:30 local time, so look out for that. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So first, a couple of disclaimers. I've got to say I was one of those who thought, certainly in the early days of the Daybell trial, that it seemed likely to me that Tammy Daybell was attacked in bed by the person next to her, Chad. I guess I underestimated the extent of pulling the wool over one's eyes, the extent of manipulation, the extent of basically leading one astray in terms of this whole crime scene. I guess I basically took Chad to be a lot more of a simpleton than he actually is, because one basically thought Chad had access, he had motive, and he had the means, and perhaps he gave up on Alex and basically eventually did the dirty deed himself. I also thought for quite a while that Tammy may have been given a sedative, which would explain the lack of the sort of classical wounds associated with asphyxia. And in the same way that the deputy medical examiner is a little bit confused by this crime, it also was quite confusing to me that the lack of evidence in the bed and in the bedroom was also quite strange. So something didn't really add up. Now, I'll explain probably in a forthcoming video why I still think the sedative analysis is potentially relevant. But what we really want to do is provide a brand new scenario based on what we know now, based on recent testimony. Of course, we base this on taking Jason's words, that's Garth's co-worker's words, literally. When he says, he said he found her when he got home from work. Now, does that mean Garth found his mother dead? Garth discovered her with his father absent. He found her on the ground, not on the bed. Where on the ground? Did he find her on the ground somewhere else in the house? Perhaps a completely different room? Where did he find her? And since Garth returned home at 1 a.m., is that when he found his mother? Because to say he said he found her when he got home from work, doesn't that mean, he got home from work at 1 a.m., is that when he found her? If that's so, why did he wait 5 hours to call 911 at 6 a.m.? Now, based in part on Chad's son's testimony and Garth's co-worker's testimony, Jason, in part, it's time to review what we know about Tammy's murder. Now, Garth seemed to misspeak on the stand about finding Tammy on the ground and frozen and his dad being absent. It also appears that Garth may have found his mother deceased, as I say, at 1 a.m. and only called 911 at 6 a.m. But during that call, Garth claimed they'd both found Tammy together, but then seemed to become flustered. And then you hear Chad grabbing the phone from his son and taking over the call. Let's listen to that part again.
What's going on? We just found my mom. She's on the ground looking for her. She's dead, and I don't know.
Are you in Madison County or Fremont County?
I'm Chad, the husband.
So that, I don't know, is kind of a weary throwing in the towel by Garth. He also, he seems far too calm for someone who's just found Tammy. Has that just happened? I must say the way the call really starts with him giving the address sounds a little bit like Patsy Ramsey, who also starts the 911 call giving an address out. Now, what else can we take from this? So I think it's strange that Garth is allowed to make the 911 call to begin with. If you really think about it, why doesn't Chad make the call? It's his wife, and he does ultimately take over the call. But why does Garth make the call to start off with? And there may be a psychological clue in this, in the same way that Garth is kind of a mama's boy, he's sort of someone who is quite sweet and will do maybe what someone else wants him to do. He may even have participated in a cover-up to help his father. That's certainly what some people have been saying. But certainly it's hard to avoid thinking that Chad seemed to want to use someone else as a front for his own dirty deed. So he wants his son's voice to be on the 911 call, not his own, until he feels that he can't really afford for Garth to speak. And so in the same way that Chad is using someone else for his own agenda, why wouldn't Chad use the same angel of death he'd been using all along, Alex? Why wouldn't Chad use the same angel of death in terms of murdering Tammy? Well, what do we know? We know that Alex had likely already been tasked with Tammy's assassination, and the idea seemed to be to get her on the driveway. Remember the attempt that happened just 10 days prior to her actual murder, that the attempt that Tammy survived and spoke about on Facebook. We also know that on the day, and likely on the night of Tammy's murder, Alex was also lurking near the Daybell property. Phone data showed Cox at a church about 2 miles from Chad Daybell's property on October 19th. That's the day Tammy Daybell died. Police couldn't identify police couldn't identify anyone else that Cox knew living in that area besides Chad. Then this part's crucial. From 10:45 p.m. to 11:53 p.m., no location data was recorded on the phone. So the phone kind of goes into this strange silence. Perhaps it was in airplane mode, perhaps something else. The next location was at 11:53 p.m. near a U.S. highway. And so this is the same ballpark figure as to when Garth arrived home. So if Chad took Alex home and Garth arrived home in the meantime, perhaps that's why Chad wasn't home. He was taking Alex home. Now, I've heard some of these speculations. I think it was a live stream on Web Sleuths with Hidden True Crime. So I've certainly heard some of these ideas mentioned there, and they do make sense. One can only wonder whether this was by accident or by design, meaning, was Garth supposed to find Tammy? What do you think? Had Chad really planned for Garth to stumble onto his mother so that he could potentially face investigation instead of himself? Or had Chad miscalculated completely? Now, what do the autopsy findings suggest about this possible alternative scenario where Chad and Alex were perhaps in cahoots about killing Tammy? Again, Dr. Lily Marston, the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner at the Utah Medical Examiner's Office, explained her findings while completing an autopsy on Tammy Daybell. She said that the manner of death was homicide, but specifically she testified about bruising on Tammy's arms. Now, to me, the bruising of arms rather than the neck or throat, that's made explicitly clear. There's acute bruising on Tammy's arms. There doesn't seem to be any where you'd expect it to be, right, in an asphyxia case. And what that suggests to me is two killers, one holding Tammy by her arms painfully, while another suffocated her, placing a rag or a hand over her mouth. And in that scenario, she can't pull that hand away. She can't remove this asphyxiating thing that is over her mouth or nose or both. Now, according to the Deputy Medical Examiner, she said, quote, all of the bruises on Miss Daybell were what we call acute, which meant that under the microscope, the only thing there that was bleeding into the soft tissues under the skin. So there was no inflammatory response. So the body had not started to mount a response to try to clean up the injury. Now, in this scenario, is it possible that Chad lured Tammy outside, possibly into the garage where Alex was waiting for her? The reason behind this perhaps was to avoid leaving microscopic crime scene evidence inside the house, things like DNA, fibers, all that sort of thing. Basically to take the crime scene outside the house, clean it up there, right? Clean Tammy herself, carry her back to her bed, and in that scenario, it would seem unlikely that she hadn't died in her sleep if there were no signs of struggle, bleeding, DNA, fibers, or anything like that. No sign of an intruder. The part that sticks out, though, is the acute bruising, when she was held by, I believe, a second perpetrator. The acute bruising never made sense in a sedative-type scenario. In any event, we'll discuss the potential use of sedatives in an even deeper analysis dealing with the Daybell children. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening. I'll see you guys at the live stream tomorrow dealing with the closing arguments.